What's up, folks? We've got the honor of having Shawn Packard on the show. Fantastic guy. We've had the honor of having a whole bunch of folks, Turning Point folks, college Republicans, representatives, and we need to make sure we do everything we can to make sure our state goes the right way. So, Mr. Packard, I'll give you a second to kind of, introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Shawn Packard. I'm running for State Representative District 64, which is Waterville and Winslow. I decided to run partly because I've kind of lived in Waterville for my whole life, grew up in foster care, and kind of seen the tide change with how Augusta handles issues like DHHS and the welfare of children. I figured the best person to be able to make a difference was somebody who has experienced the system, and then somebody who can help make a difference from the outside, from a law and policy perspective. And I've done that before when I was in care. I helped Paula Page work on trying to fix the Reunification Act in the state of Maine, and then later on went to Washington D.C. to actually help write the Foster Youth Bill of Rights.
Oh, wow.
So just back at it again because we keep seeing the same things turned out of Augusta, and I want to show that there's more possible if you just actually put your feet on the ground and really impact and help the state for the better.
So that's absolutely fantastic. I can't argue with anything you just said. That gives you a good foundation to run on, quite frankly. You've never served in Augusta, though, and so even though you've got a good basis in terms of a resume, folks might not know who you are. So,
Sure.
What would be some of your goals to pursue in Augusta?
Yeah, so there's a few. I have local ones, and then I obviously have some larger things to take on that most reps would not tackle. Again, fighting against, trying to change the course of DHHS is my biggest goal.
Yeah.
And obviously supporting trying to change things in the State House regards to that. Upcoming 29th, we have LD 127. I'll be there at the State House trying to get them to change their mind. That'll be a goal and an issue that we're going to be faced with for years to come with DHHS and the cleaning up of that.
Sure.
So that's obviously part one. Part two, though, is education. I feel like everything starts there. It's a core fundamental of how we are presenting kids across the state for careers and jobs of the future. And it does end up leading to kids even entering in care, right? Because as these kids get older, they become parents. And if they're not well versed in an educational system and state that supports them, then likely their kids will end up in care if they're not able to provide properly for their families. And so we have to be able to set people up for success and not failure. And that starts off early. And so our education system in the state of Maine, or just in most states, are broken. And that comes from standardized testing, right? 1929, put out by Horace Mann. We're not living in an industrial state anymore. Most of the mills are all shut down. What we are living in, though, is modern times. And those modern times are faced with a desire and a need to be able to have a higher paying job to be able to provide for your family. And that comes from a basis of education. And so we can't do that if we're just setting people up to be able to get a job to work at McDonald's or Walmart. And so what we need to do is retention-based tests. And we need to have teachers who are performance-based. We need them to feel empowered, and they need to be able to earn their paychecks. They don't just get raises and beg for raises every time that they, their billing cycle comes up for funding. What we need, though, is incentives to be able to teach these kids. If you asked who's your favorite teacher, you can personally remember your favorite teacher as somebody who took out 5 minutes to, just take a little bit of time out of their day and care for you just a little bit more. And that's all that we're asking, is to have that as a basis across the board. with modern technology, and I know Owen has talked about this even for his campaign for governor. But we ought to be using AI and properly, right? And in that regard, what we would use it for is if we're teaching math 5+3 or whatever, right, at a younger age, and you want to pique the child's interest. Maybe one kid's math paper has fire trucks and the other kid has police officers, whatever. But the math is still there, and that's the most important, factor in all this is that the education is there. It's that you're just critiquing things to pique interest. As it gets older, right, it's more that retention base. Fill in the blank, not A, B, C, D. We don't want people to know if they can pick 25% of the right answers. What we want to know is, did they learn what was taught in the classroom? And then did the teacher teach in a way that would allow these kids to retain the information? All that I'm asking for and all that my plan will be is to present a solution for Maine to be kind of a pioneer as one of the leading states in education for the rest of the country. And then lastly, something very local and dear to my heart is I've seen, Waterville and this area have more and more unhomed, and we're faced with tons of people that are, addicted and having a really hard time, finding resources and sustainability in Waterville. Waterville has a low barrier homeless shelter, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it also they claim that they're a rehabilitation center, so their mission statement's very broken. They don't have a clear understanding of what their goals are and what they're going to do to provide for these people. It's also the only low barrier homeless shelter north of Portland, so there's a large gap of people that have come up here. I've talked with Police Chief Bill Bonney, and he's talked about there's about 40 people every day wandering the streets because there's not enough housing for these people. And today I just went to a ribbon cutting right at the Lockwood Mill, which is an old factory position that was right, it's a turning point in Waterville for sure, because they are offering low-income housing, which is really nice. But even those low-income housings at 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms are still not affordable for the people who can't get a job even.
Yeah.
And we hear this across the state. It's not just Waterville, but there's plenty of jobs to go around, and there are people begging for work left and right. I think that, again, it comes down to resources. The resources are here as well. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to go into a battle of we need more resources, more funding. We don't. What we need is oversight. We need somebody to say, like, here's all the resources and here's all the people that need them. Now let's mingle the two and get the people the help that they deserve. And that isn't happening. I think that portions of it we see here and there, but there's not a position or a person that's willing to take on that gigantic goal of connecting all these different resources together and stringing people together to be able to make something successful. And that's what we really need. And so that's all that I'm asking for here too. Again, I don't have all the solutions. I just look at a picture from the outside and I'm able to say, like, all right, we have all the answers. And it's like scattered, but like a puzzle, we need to put it together and actually find solutions. And I can't believe we haven't done that in many years.
So you bring up a lot of really interesting points. Back to the education side of things. I know the general idea of what you're prescribing. I can see where you're coming from. Do everything you can to incentivize teachers to do the best they absolutely can to, in turn, produce the best result from the student. So my biggest question along with that is, say we did go with a model like that. Even with the model we have right now, we're in a state where 30 years ago there was competition to get a teaching position rurally. Now you're lucky if you get one at all. And so we've got a problem where there are high-quality teachers doing an amazing job in these rural school systems, but there's not enough teachers. They're stretched thin. Someone says they might be, retiring, and it sends a shockwave through the entire school system. So let's say we did get and go along with the model you're looking for. What do we do to incentivize teachers to come in the first place?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that comes from, I think, part of that model of the performance-based teaching, right? It de-incentivizes a lot of the unions where these teachers who have been there for a really long time normally would not get a raise, or they're capped out, say, at a certain amount. And then you have new teachers that are coming in, and either they're making more than older teachers did, or they have no incentive to actually work any harder to be able to get to the next goal of whatever it is, whether it's financial or educational for themselves. And so this performance-based method, essentially, which is what Job for Maine Graduates is based all on, this is not new by any means. It's been around for a while, and it's just not adopted statewide anywhere. And so what I'm proposing essentially is that these teachers would be incentivized to work harder and turn out higher educating scores per kid and per classroom. And that be based on those retention scores, we're able to look at not just the student, did the student retain the information that was taught, but did the teacher, like let's for instance say that a teacher is teaching, Shakespeare, and kids get 50% of the kids pass and 50 don't. Let's just make it really easy. Yep. So that tells me though that the teaching method was not across the board not received well. Half of the kids didn't understand it, right? So by doing that though, you now know that it's the teacher, not the kids, and we can kind of close that gap and try to talk with the teacher and the educational plan and look at what they're teaching and say, all right, clearly 50% of the kids in your entire classroom did not understand this. Now moving forward, let's try a different model or different approach to be able to retain that information. Let's say now it's an 80-20. 80% of the kids understand it and retain the information, 20% don't. Well, clearly the information is getting put out in a way that the kids understand it. The 20%, now we look at those and we say, all right, these kids clearly aren't interested or did not retain the information well. It's now the child, and now how can we approach that and look at what's going on in their life, what's going on in their educational plan that's making it so these kids aren't understanding it. So how do we get these incentives for teachers to become teachers? Well, first we have to have a teaching system across the entire state that actually works. Instead of having a few good teachers sporadically in rural areas, we want all the teachers to be good. And that right then and there I've been a teacher. I would want to be a teacher even more if I knew everybody around me had the same goals and ambitions as I did. But that's not the case right now, right? There's so many agendas, there's so many things that are being pushed in school and education, whether it's even from the school board, whether it's from the school itself or the teacher themselves, whatever they feel like. There's no system, there's no standard operating procedure for the entire state of Maine. It's, policies left and right, red tape here and there, and there's no actual standard. It's done differently in every school. And for some schools and or regions that might make sense. But it's unfortunately a crapshoot when it comes to educational plans, and there's no definitive core value for every school out there, which there should be. Some schools teach phonics, some don't, and you see that education that has worked over the years, and that's why everybody proposes, for instance, school choice, right? I'm not necessarily for or against it. I think that there's some negative and positive. In my area, school choice would be awful. There's about 100 kids that don't speak English in Waterville that have come here, whether legally or not. That's up to debate. But more importantly, they are able to play with kids who have been in Waterville forever, and play basketball, play football, but they don't even know how to speak English, and they're taking opportunities from the kids who have been here forever, and so. The pieces that need to be the most important here, though, is the educational plan. So the educational plan should be put first, and then the extracurriculars can be added in after. These kids are entering high school, whether foreign, the foreign kids, and they aren't being set up for success because they don't have a clear education plan in place.
I want to know what you mean by taking opportunities away from students that are already there. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so for instance, you have, again, legal or not, you have foreign kids that are coming into the Waterville area, and then they can play on the football or basketball team, even though they don't know how to speak English, because they know how to play the sport, right? And for me personally, if my child were in on that basketball team and then denied, say, a varsity spot because they have too many kids to pick from, and most of them say foreign, it wouldn't be fair. It doesn't make sense to have somebody who can't even have an education at the school, who attends the school but has to sit in a class where they're learning to speak English all day, because that's the reality of it. That's what they do, and it's for I get that they need the education to be able to speak English and to learn and try to fit in this area and community, but at the same time, the opportunities have dwindled for the people who are just trying to get through high school in general.
I honestly I haven't heard some of those perspectives before. In terms of the taking away the opportunities, I might have some slightly different perspectives, but I definitely can see where you're coming from in terms of wanting to bolster our quality of our education.
Sure.
I definitely think that, if you've come here legally and you're attending the school, I don't know necessarily if that's taking away an opportunity, but like I said,
if you come here legally, then you're not taking away an opportunity. I just didn't want to push the button that most of these kids are not probably here legally.
and I think that's one thing that we could get into is what can we do from the perspective of Augusta, when you get down there, how can we make sure everyone that's here in the state of Maine is here legally? I think that would be a at least I'd hope that would be a major priority of yours. At least I'd hope so.
It is, yeah. I've talked about early on in my campaign. I've seen. I was born at Inland Hospital. Inland Hospital shut down, and for me, that was a big deal. You didn't see Janet Mills come out there and wave to the camera to say, well, I'm commemorating this moment of Inland Hospital shutting down. So sorry to all the workers that have to leave. Or you didn't see even Susan Collins. I was very shocked by that. She's helped tons of fire departments and other hospitals in rural areas stay open. To me, though, what would have been a simple solution if you're allowing an influx of illegal people to come into Maine, a simple solution would have been to have incentivize legal immigration to take over the hospital. There are plenty of people in other countries who are qualified to work as doctors, who know how to speak English, who know how to do all the things that you would normally have. Heck, half of the doctors that used to be at Inland weren't from even America at all. Right? They were born in other countries and then came here and ended up working here, and that's totally fine. I would have incentivized that hospital to stay open by trying to get as many people that want to work in America, who have the degrees, to come here and legally work here. That would have kept the hospital open, and I'm darn sure that there would have been plenty of people that would have signed up for that.
Sure. You talk about incentivizing doctors to come here in Maine. What could some of those incentives be?
Well, and this is what's funny. we've had so much fraud happen in the state of Maine, right? Recently with Gateway, with Maine Care, and we're uncovering more and more all the time. And shout out to the Maine Wire for doing all that wonderful work,
Yeah.
right? And so if we're finding millions and millions of dollars in fraud, right? The money has been here. It's just a lack of putting it in the right places. So the money's able to be just scooted over, I believe, in a lot of instances. Now, yes, do I think that the governor, who, if Republican governor gets in, which is ideal, will diminish the Maine state budget? Absolutely, and I hope that happens. But let's pretend we kept the budget rate where it is. Even we could just simply move even $1 billion if we really needed to, and we could comfortably incentivize all those doctors to come over here.
Sure.
We have DHHS in general in the state of Maine, and this is all welfare, not just not obviously what people are used to when I say DHHS when it comes to child welfare, but this includes Maine Care, food stamps, all this, right? That covers about 4.2 or 4.6 billion dollars of the Maine state budget. So.
Wow.
We could really we could fix some of that. 40% of Mainers are on Maine Care. Again, something that we need to fix and look at and identify. Hey, do all of these Mainers that are on Maine Care, are they not just deserving of it? I don't like to use that terminology. I think because, again, as Ben Midgley has talked about in point two, if we just cut these people off, that's their livelihood. It's what they're using right now. So they would literally die without it. And so I think there needs to be a tapering or step down program from a lot of these things. And we need to work towards those things. If they are truly deemed not, that they don't need it, then they need to be weaned off from it.
Yep.
And then incentivized to work too, by the way.
Oh, for sure. Well, I think that it's something I personally don't like is I can understand the need for a social safety net, if you want to put it that way. But reaching a point in society where it's almost your only option. I'm not saying it is your only option, but it's becoming that way. I don't like that. If you're on Maine Care, okay, you do you, whatever. I don't want you to be dependent on the government, but if that's where you are, okay. But I don't want to be told that I have to be dependent on the government.
Yeah, it's really sad. So I used to manage Walmart. I've managed GameStop. I've worked in these areas where I have come across an employee that might come up and they say things like, hey man, I'd really like to work more than 30 hours, but if I do, I lose this benefit. And I'm scared that if I lose that benefit, that I'll never be able to get back on it, so I can't do that. They want to work, but they also don't want to lose that benefit. And Robert Wessels has actually told me that he had an employee who luckily denied wanting to do this, but they were told from DHHS that, it looks like because you're working 20 hours a week, you can only get $8 in benefit. But if you actually quit, you'll get a full $40-something thousand in benefits.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And they were smart enough to say, no, I didn't want to do that. But most people would be like, yeah, if I can get more money by quitting, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So this is why I have a problem with a lot of people who like socialism, for instance, which is like basically making it so everybody doesn't have to do anything. The reality is that if you give somebody the option to not work and still earn a paycheck, they likely won't.
Yep. Wow. That I haven't heard that story before, the one you just shared. That's nuts. I'm usually good at following up directly with another question, but I'm speechless from that. The way we incentivize laziness, quite frankly,
Oh, I know. Yeah.
that's nuts. Okay, so we've hit on some things regarding education, welfare, a whole bunch of different things. What would you want to do? You get to Augusta, taxes. We have a lot of taxes here in the state of Maine, and we have a lot that we could easily get rid of. What would be some of your top priorities when it comes to taxation?
Yeah, well, Waterville is quite high tax too. So, the idea really in this area, in this town in general, and across the state too. But it comes to we have to incentivize small businesses, and we have to try to get more businesses that are local and bring more people to the state that want to stay here. Keep the college kids here, whether it's having a feeder program through trade school or whatever it may be. But I think having more local businesses obviously helps boom the economy in general. And then we can work on lowering property taxes. And that's the real thing here. I mean, we have so many bigger businesses that are coming to, and that are here that have just swamped out small businesses entirely. Maine is one of those unique states where we have 135,000 small businesses in the state of Maine. And for every small business, there's also like 135,000 regulations for small businesses, which is really crazy. And it really decentivizes people to come and start a small business. That being said, we really shouldn't have that because Maine is the #1 entrepreneurial state in the entire nation. And so if that's true, then why is it so heavily red taped? We need to have incentives to have small businesses. And as a small business owner, I know what that's like. It's detrimental. And we really ought to have ways for youth, especially in the state of Maine, to want to have small businesses here. Sure. And I think that there are plenty of youth that want that. But once they start getting into the weeds of it, they're like, wow, man, it's so expensive to do it. And I'll be honest, it is. And so why is that? Well, the reason right now is it's a Democrat majority state, and they feel like the people that they can tax the most are the people that are making money, and that comes from not just wealthy people, everybody, and all the trickles down with Democrats. It's terrible. Yeah. What we need to do, though, is to have a lift-up system where we're engaging small business owners and helping them grow their business to be something successful that gives back to economic areas in the state. And again, that lowers the property tax, and hopefully, maybe, if given the opportunity, eliminates it.
Yep. Now, you mentioned you're a business owner. What's your experience there on the business side of things? And you mentioned the red tape. What's been some of the negative effects for you?
Yeah. Oh, man. Taxes are crazy. I got a location right on Main Street right here in Waterville. And Waterville, this isn't a tax, I don't think, everywhere, and not just in the state of Maine, but it's here in Waterville. We have tax on your location. So not just the fact that you may own your location, but tax on individual items that you own. So I bought everything in my office, chairs, tables, equipment, right? The city of Waterville decides to tax me on all those things again. And
what?
They do it annually. Yeah.
How do they manage that? You've got original sales tax when you buy it, but how do they go about that business?
Yeah, so it's I should pull up the form. I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize, and I don't want to misquote it, but it's like an itemized deduction thing for the city of Waterville, just like for usage everyone has to pay it. It's crazy.
What a nightmare.
It is, and it's just arbitrary. It caps off at like $600 or something. I'm not sure. I know it wasn't terribly high, but it's still another step. Oh, it's another step in the cog for them to say, all right, let's get more money out of people. And again, I just opened. So here's the thing. Like I've been in business now. This is year two, but I got this location in October, and we're coming into April, and obviously taxes has already happened, and that's. But it's like so. I was like 5 months in, and I get this letter, and it's like, hey, you owe us more money. And I'm like, I just got this thing going, right? Spent about $70,000 to get this entire thing built out, and you're telling me I owe you more money? Which is true.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. things you would usually write off as a business expense, they're taxing on you. They're
Yeah, they
taxing.
want everything written down too. They even in the paper it says like tables, chairs, equipment. If you have an AC, if you all of it. Yeah,
My gosh.
yeah,
Wow. Okay, so we clearly need to change the majority in Augusta. And that's not just the House and the Senate, that's get a Republican governor. And then put the sign back up that Governor LePage had saying open for business.
right.
Holy mackerel. Is there anything we could do from the state level to say, hey, Waterville, get your act together? And not just Waterville, but all of them? Or is that something that's out of the state's jurisdiction?
No, it's not out of the state's jurisdiction. I mean, it's definitely something that you can do. And again, it comes to incentivizing and then also holding them accountable, right? Because you can say something like, well, if you remove that tax, right, then we will sway, the state will sway people to, spend more money in your town, for instance, like through DEP, DOT, or even like, Main Street just got $850,000 to do more revitalization downtown. And that was state funded or federally funded, right? But again, they don't understand that the policymakers in Augusta are the ones who are pushing for those things. And they'd be less likely to push for them if the town is decentivizing small businesses. Just saying, if that docket came across my desk, as much as I want to add $850,000 to Main Street, I don't if they're not incentivizing, business owners to stay in business in this area. So I might think twice about it. And so, but the most important thing really is these small business. I mean, we have so many kids. We have 3 big major colleges right here in town, right? We have Kobe College, we have KVCC, and we have Thomas. And there isn't enough opportunity given to these kids to be able to want to stay here. It's almost like we basically say, hey, we're a destination college town or city, but then we'll let them go somewhere else to actually set up tent. But the reality is we need to have these people stay in this area, again, to stimulate the economy in this area. And then furthermore, to bring down our median age, which is 56 in Waterville. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. No, that is a huge point. I mean, I'm 21. I'm a sophomore in college. I'm currently going to college at Liberty in Virginia. 2 states that I've got connections with is Virginia and Maine. If I had, take politics out of it, if I had to choose a state to live in, Virginia and Maine would probably be the 2 that I'd choose. But both of them are controlled by one party, and it starts with the letter D, not the letter R.
Right.
And they're getting economically ransacked. They don't represent a large portion of the state. You look at Virginia, the northern part of the state and a couple other areas dominate Richmond. You look at Maine, there's a little strip on the southern part of the state that dominates the rest of the state. I go back home to Maine, there's no job opportunities. There's no nothing. And quite frankly, Virginia's what's that?
Not unless you make your own, but then you're again behind the 135,000 regulated red tape, protocol that they have going on in the state of Maine, which is just awful. For every one that they make in Augusta, they need to get rid of 2 or 3 of them going forward.
I think that could be something we could incentivize if we could get this legislation passed. We need a majority to do it.
Yeah.
But for every small business regulation passed, 2 have to be removed.
Right.
And that would really, quite frankly, help in many cases prevent regulations from coming in at the first place.
Correct.
It's not always a good idea to put things in your constitution, but if you want to guarantee Maine is a business-friendly state, would you consider legislation like that being put into the state constitution?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I quite frankly, we need checks and balances. And when you've been in power for a gazillion years, like the Democrat Party has been here in the state of Maine, they have no accountability. They have no checks and balances, broadly speaking. I mean, when you can put the legislature in in an emergency session and your reasoning for the emergency session is unfinished business, last I checked, that wasn't an emergency, they have unchecked power. So if we could get the majority, put some legislation like that into the state constitution, not that I want to go crazy with the Constitution, but it might be the only way to prevent some of these things from happening again.
I agree.
Sure. Well, this has been extremely productive and very interesting. We've been able to cover a lot of different topics. Quite frankly, we need more folks to run. We need more folks to be active. We need folks that have energy, and you seem to be one of those folks. You know, I've campaigned in a couple different election cycles in Maine and got a lot of good people run, but they haven't had the energy. They haven't put the effort in. And I think you might be different. So I encourage you, and you will be in my prayers, and I'm glad you were able to join me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You got it. God bless.
God bless.